Great, welcome back. I'm very excited about our next speaker. Wade Crowfoot was appointed California Secretary for Natural Resources by Governor Gavin Newsom in January 2019. As Secretary, Crowfoot oversees an agency of 19,000 employees charged with protecting and managing California's diverse resources. As a member of the governor's cabinet, he advises the governor on natural resources and environmental issues. Crowfoot believes effective management of California's resources allow communities and natural places to thrive and for the economy to grow. This includes strengthening the connection between California and natural resources by expanding access to parks and natural places. Crowfoot is also prioritizing building California's resilience to growing challenges from climate-driven threats, including drought, wildfire, flooding, and sea level rise. So it's my pleasure to welcome to our summit today, Secretary Crowfoot.
Hey, thanks so much, and thanks for having me at this virtual advocacy day. 2020 is a strange year, and this is a strange way to have an advocacy day, but really good on you all in the recreation industry for keeping this and keeping the ball moving forward on our shared priorities, even amidst all the threats we face. I have to say on a personal note that the outdoors has been more important than ever for my own family since March with the stay-at-home order. We found safe ways to be in the backcountry and be outside, and I've spent more time outdoors on the weekends this year than I have in the last 10 years. And as you know, what we're seeing is spiking visitation to our state parks and our ecological preserves, certainly national parks where they've been open. A lot of folks on the hiking trails, a lot of people buying the recreational swag. I have to say I've spent a disproportionate amount of my own spending at the Sacramento REI. And as I talked to folks at the REI and then I bought some fishing stuff up at Bass Pro, they say that sales have spiked for outdoor equipment, which is great. And I think it speaks to the importance of the outdoors, I think, for all of us. Not only for the hardcore among us that spend a lot of their time outdoors, but regular people. When they need emotional and mental relief, they go to beautiful places outdoors. So thanks a ton for all you do in the coalition to advance access to our outdoors. I have to say it's really, as I look out the window here in Sacramento, it's a disturbing last several weeks with the wildfires and the unprecedented heat wave and of course the air quality. And I'll talk more about that in climate change and what we need to be doing. But I just think, you know, when our outdoors is unhealthy or unsafe, I think that's really disturbing to, you know, all of us and our daily lives. So this, both the this year and the popularity of getting outdoors and now the challenges of literally being outside over the last couple of weeks are indications of just, you know, how critical the outdoors is. And not only to the companies that benefit from, you know, activities in the outdoors or advocates for the outdoors, but just regular people. I have to say I've been involved this summer in all sorts of different types of recreation, from, you know, fly fishing in Yosemite to tubing down the American River. And I think we all have to recognize that the outdoors are important to really almost everybody. And while we might recreate in different ways, whether that's fishing and hunting or simply buying a tube at Dick's Sporting Goods and going down a river, or even off-highway vehicles or backcountry camping like I like to do, we have an amazing state for being outdoors. And that's, I think, our collective priority is how do we make it even more amazing for Californians? So at our Natural Resources Agency, I talk about 3 cardinal priorities that we have. And a lot of you are maybe Sacramento veterans, but for those who don't know too much about the Natural Resources Agency, we're sort of the Department of Interior at the state level. So we're charged with stewarding California's natural resources and historic and cultural resources. And so that includes within our agency, state parks, fish and wildlife, Department of Water Resources, CAL FIRE, of course, the California Conservation Corps, our conservancies, the Energy Commission, the Coastal Commission. So it's quite a broad agency. And together we have this incredible mission of stewarding our outdoors and natural resources. So 3 cardinal priorities that we have, and I share these with you because I'm hoping we can work together to advance them here in coming months and years. The first one is obviously climate resilience. And I don't have to tell you the importance of that as we face the worst wildfire season in California's history. We know climate change is impacting California right now, whether that's through worsening wildfires, droughts, flooding, sea level rise and coastal erosion, extreme heat. So while California leads the world in reducing greenhouse gas pollution and tackling climate change broadly, we are working to do more to protect communities and natural places from the impacts of climate change. And just over the last month, over 2.5% of the state's landmass has burned in these catastrophic wildfires. So I think we all recognize that we need to do a lot more to build our climate resilience and protect people and nature from the impacts of climate change. And I think the outdoor recreation industry is a really powerful association of obviously companies, advocates, political interests that can really drive prioritizing climate resilience. And I'm happy to talk more about what that actually means. We obviously need to build investment and provide more funding for taking proactive action to build climate resilience. Wildfire safety is a perfect example where we need to do more to manage our forests for health and resilience, to reduce catastrophic wildfire. We know wildfire is part of California's ecology, so it's not about preventing all wildfires, but it's about managing those wildfires so that they actually have ecological benefit and don't kill people and consume property. So number 1 priority, climate resilience. Second priority, and these 3 are in no particular order, is expanding access to outdoors for all Californians. And I know this is something that the association is really championing. Let's be honest, we have the biggest and best state park system in the country that provides unequal access depending on where you live in California. And far too many Californians don't have access to green space or nature. They don't have access to a state park or a federal park or even a local park. And it's not only physical access to parks, but it's also all sorts of other barriers that prevent them from actually getting outdoors and enjoying outdoors. So we're really committed to learning from a lot of groups and leaders on the ground in the agency around how we can build more access. Third priority is maintaining our biodiversity in California. California actually has world-class richness or variety of plants and animals and other forms of life. Of California's 5,500 plants species that grow in our state, about 40% are endemic to our state, growing nowhere else in the world. And we have similar richness within our animal kingdom in California. While we celebrate sort of the natural beauty of California, I think we don't understand and elevate the importance of this biodiversity. And while the world obviously is confronted with climate change, another major second planetary crisis we're facing is this mass extinction crisis across the globe. And so an international movement has developed, as you know, or some of you may be involved in, to really protect or conserve far more of the earth, its land and waters, to enable maintaining this biodiversity for future generations. And that's important, and we are interested in our agency and in the Newsom administration around how we can do more and better on natural resource management to really manage for biodiversity, so that we are optimizing our investments, whether it's bond funding or grant funding or programs within our agency, to really target where we can keep ecosystems and plants and animals healthy. We know we have strong laws to protect species on the brink of extinction, both federally and in the state, those endangered species laws, and those are critical. But we can't have a healthcare policy that only spends money in the emergency room. In other words, we need to spend far more money and be far more strategic around maintaining intact ecosystems, keeping ecosystems healthy, and plants and animals from being threatened with extinction. And so these priorities, that access for all, that maintaining biodiversity, that climate resilience, we envision this as a Venn diagram. In other words, these aren't separate compartments that each have their own policies or priorities or investments. But increasingly, how do we actually invest resources, build new laws, regulations, incentives? How do we build partnerships that actually advance all of this together? How can we actually get in California's 33 million acres of forest and ensure that those forests are maintained in a healthy way for the plants and animals, the water that passes through those watersheds, but also to minimize catastrophic wildfire, while expanding access, public access to those lands, and doing it in a way that bring new users of the land forward. So that's the kind of symbiotic actions that we're really looking toward. And as I said, I think you all in the association have a really unique voice, because you have sort of one part of your identity is within the business community, or at least the companies that are part of this. And then another part is within the environmental movement. So I think you can be a really important bridge. Ultimately, we want to advance all of this policy in a way that meets our other goals. We know we need to build more housing in California. We know we need to build more equity, economic equity and economic prosperity in California. And too often the environment gets pitted against economic growth. I think we've demonstrated in California that we can continue to grow our economy into the 5th largest economy in the world while championing environmental protection and having one of the sort of strongest environmental ethos of anywhere in the world. So I'm really excited with all that's happening. I think we have a daunting challenge. I think coming out of these wildfires this summer, knock on wood, God forbid we have another dry winter, Californians understand that really we don't have a choice to double down and build our climate resilience and protect our nature and our communities. And that's what we're going to do. So very much looking forward to partnering with you all again in coming months and years, and would be glad to answer any questions that either the moderator or members of or participants here today have. So thanks, Matt.
Great, thank you very much. And I fully agree. Environment and economy is our focus. So I agree with you on that. I've got a couple of questions for you. First one, many of our members and supporters were advocates for the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, and we're all thrilled that it passed. The permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund is a huge boost to safeguarding and improving lands for conservation and recreation. How do you see the Act and the increased LWCF funding impacting California's public lands? Oh, you're on mute.
I do that once a meeting. First of all, the passage of that act at the federal level is a huge deal, and it's going to have impacts in decades to come for a couple of reasons. One is, in recent decades, the federal government has divested from a whole lot of functions that it used to fund in a major way. And so actually stepping back in and renewing the fund is important. Secondly, it provides consistent funding year over year. And one major problem we have in California is, the pathway we've used to raise funding for natural resources is typically these periodic general obligation bonds. And those are, one, uncertain because they require a vote of the people. And then two, they can only be used on one-time capital uses. So it's really hard to actually maintain, for example, operations of a ecological preserve that you purchased with bond funds. So Matt, the Great Outdoors Act is going to provide consistent funding for California and other places in the country, and we're working hard to really develop a strategy to ensure that we can bring as many resources as appropriate to California. I think we have to work with folks here today to really ensure, again, that money is optimized. that it builds our climate resilience, it protects and enhances nature, and importantly, it builds access to communities that don't have good outdoor access.
It's a great point. We've seen challenges with Prop 68, which we were advocating for, or some of our folks were, and even though there was a set aside in that for programs, it's been difficult to actually identify what funds or what programs would be eligible for spending from bond money. Second question, and this one comes based upon a question from Dana Stroud, one of our members. In mid-August, you signed the agreement for shared stewardship of California's forest and rangelands with the U.S. Forest Service. One of the elements of that agreement that is of most interest to today's participants is the goal of collaboration between state and federal partners for sustainable recreation. What does sustainable recreation mean to you in terms of that agreement, and how do you see implementation of that part of the agreement being advanced?
Yeah, well, so, first of all, if we're going to actually build, recreation and improve recreation in California, it has to include our public lands, almost definitionally, right? Public lands comprise over 50% of our state's land mass. The federal government owns most of that. Upwards of 45% of California's land is managed by federal agencies. So improving recreation has to include federal agencies. We're excited with that shared stewardship agreement with the Forest Service, because the Forest Service does manage most of that federal land. And certainly, most of the Sierra is managed by the National Forest. When we talk about sustainable recreation, I think we're talking about environmentally sustainable recreation. So there's this sort of thought that somehow protecting, some traditional thinking has been protecting nature means keeping people out of nature. And I would disagree. I think actually people are a critical part of environmental sustainability and sustainable land management. So I think some of the places that best preserve biodiversity, for example, have significant recreation in them, including in some cases fishing and hunting. So, but first of all, recreation of the outdoors needs to be environmentally sustainable. We need to utilize recreation to improve and maintain the environment. Two, it has to be economically sustainable too. And so we have to find funding sources that avoid a boom and bust. So we have, really good access and facilities 1 year, but then 3 years later, those facilities are in a bad way. It's a little bit wonky, but deferred maintenance is a big issue here. So we have to figure out a way to actually sustain our recreational opportunities economically or fiscally. And then the third, I think, is as it relates to sustainable recreation, is it has to be accessible recreation. And again, I think we're ultimately not meeting the moment if we're not building recreation options for people and communities that haven't had those recreation options in the past. And that's going to require some creativity, because a lot of our recreational places to recreate are pretty isolated, not always, but somewhat isolated. Matt, you raised that Prop 68 supporters developed a portion of that bond to actually fund programs that provide access, but that ran into legal challenges around the spending, bond funding on operational dollars. But we have to support organizations that are actually linked into communities and helping people get out. It's not enough to simply even create a park near a community that hasn't had access. A lack of physical access is just one barrier. There are a lot of other forms of barriers to access that are problematic. So we need to address those too. So I think, environmental sustainability, fiscal sustainability, and then, broad inclusive access are sort of the three ingredients for the work that'll happen under this agreement with the Forest Service.
Okay, great. No, that's we're really happy to see it. Happy to see sustainable recreation, and completely agree with you. The lands that the people use and experience are the ones that they're going to protect. Final question: where would you like to see California's outdoor recreation businesses and organizations engage on recreation and stewardship policies?
Well, one is, I think, really being a full-throated champion of investments that build climate resilience, biodiversity, and access. Again, I think you all, as I read over the panels that you have and the focus of this day, I mean, I think you get it, but I think really getting in there and being a really strong voice on this. It was really inspiring to see the outdoor recreation community stand up to the Trump administration in some really important ways when it started going after national monuments. Because the fact is, preserving our environment and building our sustainability and resilience benefits the industry. And the consumers, a lot of the consumers of products in this industry have really strong environmental values. So I think the request would be, be bold, be a business voice in the Capitol that's really well aligned with conservation voices, equity and access voices, scientific voices. Because again, Matt, too often we have to operate in this stale paradigm of environment versus economy. And we know the last 4 years, the federal administration has very much stoked those divisions. You all are a critical bridge to trash that paradigm and say that actually our economic prosperity relies on environmental sustainability. So really look forward to hearing from you. And you should also, feel free to and be invited to hold state agencies accountable. So I think too often, well, not too often, but a lot of the focus is on, legislative bills and legislative disagreements, and those are important. But there's a lot of work that happens within our agencies to meet these goals. And certainly a lot of our friends in the advocacy community hold us accountable for actually getting all this done. So, we would invite you to do that too.
All right, you heard it here. Secretary Crowfoot says, be bold. All right, well, it's been an honor to have you. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. Best of luck today.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jared. Hi, guys. I'm back. Steve Barker here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Steve, you're good.
Thank you. So it is my pleasure today and an honor to introduce Angela Barranco, who I had the opportunity to work with briefly this spring pre-COVID on the Equitable Access Working Group that she convened and led. Ms. Barranco was appointed Undersecretary of California Natural Resources by Governor Newsom in May of 19. And she oversees an agency of 19,000 employees charged with protecting and managing California's diverse resources, includes stewarding state forests, natural lands, rivers, waterways, coast, ocean, fish and wildlife, and energy development. Whew, that's quite a job. Secretary, welcome.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. And thank you for all your wonderful input on our, just before the COVID hit, we were doing these amazing meetings about how to increase access in California. So thank you. And Steve was a wonderful representative for all of your work. So just really excited to be here today, and thank you. And the good news is that I share that incredible mandate and responsibility with Secretary Crowfoot. And so, he is a wonderful partner to everything we do. And I'm just so happy and thankful to be, a part of the natural resources team. And he got the opportunity to really talk about, some of the big picture stuff that we're thinking about, whether it's climate change, biodiversity, or access. And I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about access in particular, just because I'm personally passionate about it, but also I know it's something all of you are really focused on. And just looking at the agenda, the incredible speakers that you have and all of the work that you're going to do today virtually, which is a little unusual and a little bit strange for all of us, but incredibly important, and so glad you are doing it today. So thank you, Steve. But, so I'll just jump in and say, and I think this is stating the obvious, we found ourselves in a really incredible time in history. And while it's incredibly difficult, and we have to acknowledge the unprecedented nature of the stress and the hardship that's being faced all across this country, and especially in California, whether it's the emergency response or COVID, the wildfires, civil unrest, it's such a really challenging time, as we all know. So the first thing to do is like take a breath and accept and sort of understand that moment. But then also for us who are working in this space to really lift up a solution, it's so incredible to see outdoor access becoming this now essential service. You know, I think in many ways prior to March and much of the COVID quarantine, you know, a lot of folks would consider, you know, outdoor access as a luxury. And while many of the folks on the, you know, at this meeting today know that that's not true, I think that perception always meant that this issue was maybe perhaps not at the forefront. But since then, and I think in an experience that we've seen, you know, repeated across communities across California and frankly across the nation and the world, our access to outdoor spaces has become critical for mental health, for physical health, for all the ways that we can build community during this really unusual time. And so it is just an incredible moment to see, you know, like I said, you know, Steve and I were in meetings earlier this year where, you know, we were thinking about how to make this issue really at the top of the list of importance, and all of a sudden sort of world events took over. So I'll just give you some statistics and then a little bit about our programs, and then would love to chat more and get any questions that you all have. But, you know, I think when you start thinking about the number of people that could really benefit, it also just elevates this issue tremendously, especially during this time of quarantine. Right now, 1 out of 4 Californians, somewhere around 9.5 million, have no public access or open space within walking distance. So think about that, 1 out of 4 Californians. It's a tremendous number of folks who, especially now during quarantine, you know, can't step outside of their doors and go to a comfortable, easy, safe place to recreate, whether it's just walking around the block, you know, running around or going to go get some fresh air. In addition to that, I would say this is an even more stark statistic. 6 out of 10 Californians, 24.7 million, live in areas that are park poor. And what you would consider park poor are, you know, areas where you don't have sort of optimal access. So they're not, you know, well-maintained parks. There are very few parks per person. You know, and so you have a situation where you have a majority of Californians that are really struggling to be able to find access to the outdoors. And, you know, that runs the gamut. It's not just urban communities, but also rural communities that have this particular issue. So, you know, I'll add on to that, you know, my own personal story. I had, you know, I was an urban city kid. The first time I actually went real camping, you guys are going to laugh, I was 20 years old and went camping out in Arizona. And it was a mind-blowing, life-changing experience. Literally changed my direction from being a biologist into a conservation biologist, which meant that eventually I started doing policy work in this space. And I draw it all back to that moment and that experience. The ability for me to go out, see the stars, be a part of nature, really connect the dots for me when it comes to things like climate change, the understanding that we're all connected, the opportunity to de-stress and understand the importance of the outdoors for mental health. And so hearing, you know, Wade talk about all the time his family has spent in the outdoors, it's been really incredible to see all of the ways that people are really expanding even their own personal uses to be able to help them cope during these, you know, difficult times. So what I will add to that, you know, just, you know, how are we as an agency, you know, as leaders within the state, really thinking about the work that's ahead of us in terms of how to expand access? You know, the first question I would put on the table is, you know, we're really thinking about what is the definition of access? And this is not just a theoretical prospect, because you talk to 10 people, you get 10 different answers of what access means. But I think our job and sort of view that we share is to expand that notion of access to as many people as possible. So not just thinking about expanding programs or protecting programmatic funds to be able to make sure that we can ensure that kids and people from all over California can experience these places, but also what does access mean in terms of your ability to easily and sustainably access outdoor spaces or green spaces within your community. So really thinking about those things. The other thing that I would add on to it, and I know you guys are talking about this later today, is the Jedi work. We need to think of access as also the people who we interact with in these spaces, the decision makers that are going to be sustaining and protecting these resources moving forward, as well as the advocates and the leaders on the outside who are going to be thinking about how to keep access available for all. So, how do we bring in representative communities? How do we support individuals who are, in these places, and also, grow and expand the reach that we have in many, many different places. So I will say, and people don't often think about Natural Resources Agency in the full breadth of different types of experiences that we have. They often think about parks. Obviously, we have the largest park system in all of this, the nation, and so we have incredible resources available to the public every single day. But we also have incredible wild spaces that are managed by Fish and Wildlife and by CAL FIRE, which include camping, boating, and other recreation. We also have Department of Water Resources that most people know manage things like the State Water Project, but they also manage lakes and reservoirs for the benefit of those who do fishing and boating as well. And so, one last thing I forgot to add, which is coastal access. We have the Coastal Conservancy. We have many different conservancies, both that deal with coastal and land access issues. And so we have an incredible variety of resources to think about access in general. So, the first encouragement I would say is it's not just parks, but it includes a huge part of our public lands across California. And so, the last thing I'll touch on, and then I'm happy to take questions, but, really thinking about how do we do this? And I mentioned, maintaining programs and then expanding the definition of access to ensure that everybody has, these essential outdoor spaces in their communities. But, just to take it one step further, literally how are we going to do this over the next coming months and years? And, one of the things that really pops to the top of my list is obviously partnership. And this is such an incredible moment where the work that you guys are doing to really advocate for these spaces, to advocate for access, to advocate for the protection at the federal, state, and local level is so aligned with what we're trying to do. So, finding different ways to make sure that we're able to continue to work together and to build and amplify off of the work that we do together. So put a pin on that. You and I, Steve, we're going to keep working. We got a lot more work to do, and with all of you. The next I would say is coordination, and I think we touched upon that a little bit with the stewardship agreement question. Between state, local, and federal, there's a lot more we can do as governmental entities to coordinate. So when you go into a park, you don't really know whether it's a local park, a state park, a federal, entity, and you shouldn't have to, right? We should all be seamlessly integrated and be able to create opportunities across a matrix of these different types of open spaces so that all communities can have access. And so we can do a lot more to coordinate across all of these facilities to ensure maximum access. And then the last thing, which I'll leave you guys with, is just thinking about real leadership at this moment. We are given a gift in so many ways of this challenge to be able to think outside the traditional boxes that we've been normally operating in. The great grind to a halt for all of us has allowed us to have a lot of time and space and frankly, a lot of urgency to think about things in a new and different way. And so how do we tackle some of the systemic inequality? How do we think about the systems that we have built and have maintained over the years that are not serving all of the communities that we need to do? I will just leave you that this interesting statistic, and then I'll leave you on a high note, but this is kind of a sad note. One of the first things that the California Fish and Game did in 1860 was create a license act that barred any Chinese without a $4 a month license from fishing. So, just so you think about these systems, they're incredibly complex, they're incredibly old, but they are systemic legacies like this that we need to be fully aware of and kind of really understanding from the get-go. But what's incredible right now is to see the enthusiasm, to see the diversity of leadership, and to see the incredible commitment by folks like you. So I know that with all of us combined, we're going to just take this momentum and run with it. And so just really excited to partner with all of you, and best of luck today. But Steve, anything else I should cover or talk about?
Thank you, Angela. You did great. In fact, you answered most of my questions I had here about money for programming, access, transportation. So I ask you what might be a little unfair question. Well, what do you think is the appetite in the state for more of an institutional solution to access and outdoors, something similar to California's statewide outdoor learning through the school system? There's a CalSol movement, which maybe you had heard of. What do you think the appetite is? Of course, right now funding is precious, but is this something that you think is possible?
I think the thing that we all have to do is everything is possible. We all have to kind of contemplate. I think our job is to figure out, what would be the highest and best use of something like that, and where would it live, and how would it be supported in a time of low, of difficult budgets and stretched resources. But I think what's exciting is let's contemplate all the possible things, because I think right now, like I said, I feel like I keep saying this to everyone I talk to, but it's just like, it's such an opportunity to take a step back and revisit and rethink things. And so, I would say let's put all options on the table. Let's think about what's possible, and no promises, of course. We don't know what we can do, but I think at the same time, of course. But I think, especially for access, it's something that all the way up to the governor, he's extremely tuned into and really thinking about a lot. Just last week, he went to Big Basin State Park, which was devastated by the wildfires. And that's really not just due to, kind of the historic nature of the first park in our state's, park system, but his own personal commitment to ensuring that these spaces are, bounce back from these terrible moments, and that we encourage and increase the access to all of these places every day. So I would say let's keep talking, and I look forward to hearing from you and all of you about your ideas on how we can do that.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and your leadership during these very challenging and difficult times, but thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Okay, bye. It's still me, and
Assemblymember Kalra, will you put on your video, please?
I'm here.
There he is. Hi, Steve Barker here. It's my pleasure to introduce to all of you Ash Kalra. Ash Kalra lives in Hayes, the same neighborhood in San Jose where he grew up, which is pretty unique, and especially in California where everyone moves around. In November of 2016, Assemblymember Kalra was elected to the 27th Assembly District. And to help you with your geography, that encompasses San Jose, East San Jose, Evergreen, and parts of South San Jose. So he was appointed to the chair of the Assembly Committee on Labor and Employment, which is relevant to our business owners on the phone, on the Zoom, aging and long-term care, education, judiciary, and good for us, water, parks, and wildlife committees. He's established himself as a leader on many issues we care about, including the environment, conservation. He is the first Indian American to serve in the California legislature in state history, which is hard to believe, but congratulations. And this legislative session, Corp, Outdoor Alliance, and OIA all supported Assembly Members Kalra's bill AB 3030, which included unique and monumental language to increase access for communities of color economically disadvantaged communities. You know, I just love how that bill starts out. And I'm going to read this, sorry everybody, and then we'll get right to the Assembly member. Access to public land, nature, and a healthy environment should be a right for all people, including those who lack equitable access to these resources, as this access is essential to the health, well-being, identity, culture, and economic prosperity of California. So, you know, that is music to our ears. You know, in AB 3030, we see where equitable access, conservation, and climate really come, and that's the mashup, the nexus, and the space where our industry values live. And so tell us about the inspiration and your vision for AB 3030, where the bill is now. I know we sort of got suspensed, but hopefully there's a future for it. Tell us about it and how, as an industry, we can help you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I want to start by thanking all of you, the California Outdoor Recreation Partnership, Outdoor Alliance, OIA, for being such great partners in supporting AB 3030 and having the wisdom of understanding, you know, what we're trying to do here. Because you know, there were some commercial fishermen and others that had some concerns about it and expressed them very vocally. But the reality is, if you look at the text of the bill and what our goals are actually to protect more of California's land and water, whether it's coastline or within the state, which actually increases access. And that was a big part of the bill, to increase access to Californians or those that come to California to enjoy our beautiful environment. And so it's actually a huge opportunity for business. And as we've heard from Secretary Crowfoot and Undersecretary Barranco, you know, this is not an either or. And AB 3030 recognized that by preserving 30% of our land, 30% of our water, what we're doing is we're actually forcing some of our development of housing, what have you, into more denser urban areas, as it should be. But what we're also doing is we're making sure that when we create our open spaces, it's done in an environmentally responsible way, and it's done in a way that creates access to all communities in our state. And members of your organization know better than most how to do all that, how to create spaces that are open to everyone, where people can recreate, where they take care of the environment. And frankly, it is the not just the environmental advocacy and environmental justice community, but it's those business owners that actually are in that space that absolutely understand the need to protect those spaces, not just for, you know, their economic viability, but because that's why you're in business, is really to share so much of our beautiful environment with the rest of the world. And that's why it was great to get so many businesses on board in support of AB 3030. It did get held up in Senate appropriations. It's not unique for that to happen. So we're gonna bring it back this next year in a fresh legislative cycle. It may have a different number to it. 3030 actually worked out pretty well. But at the end of the day, it's what the bill intends to do that matters. And as we heard from the secretary and undersecretary, what we really need and what I need from the community is to join together in sharing not just your support, but your expertise. Because so many of you that are here on this Zoom have greater expertise than so many others, whether they're in the government, in the Capitol, or lobbying at the Capitol. You have a level of expertise, especially when it comes to combining that economic viability with the environmental protection. And that's really what we're trying to do with this bill. And so, you know, AB 3030 is a critical part of us setting an expectation as a state. Our state has done that in so many ways. By 2030, protecting 30% of our land and water, but we're not overly prescriptive. We don't say you have to do it in these particular ways. We want to set the goal and then work with partners like you to achieve it. And so that's where I think it really hits that that sweet spot in terms of government regulation, where it's not overly regulating businesses or how people can enjoy our great state, but it also sets an expectation of what we as Californians want to see happen in our state in terms of protecting and preserving. And with all the wildfires, everything that we see happening, we have to be more thoughtful about how we protect our state and protect our open spaces. And so I'm very excited. I'm a little sad that the bill didn't make it all the way this year, but I'm excited about this great community we have that's supporting it, including the Outdoor Recreation Partnership and numerous environmental organizations, including those that focus on access, like Azul, which focuses on access to the Latino community to our coast. So we have different aspects of our community coming together, joining in support, because we recognize that when we do a lot of these land protections and conservation, sometimes it feels like it's way out in the corner of the state where no one can access it. We don't want that. I know you don't want that. We want it in and near where our communities live, to have it easily accessible, to make sure cost is not a barrier. And I know many of you as part of this organization make sure that you create access even to lower income communities so they can also enjoy this great state. And we want to make sure that everyone has a stake in protecting our environment. When they're able to enjoy it, you feel some ownership. If you go, if you're able to enjoy our coastline or our ocean, if you're able to enjoy our beautiful parks and open spaces, then you feel invested in it. And we want, all 40 million Californians to feel invested in our state, in our open spaces, in our water. And they can do that with your help because you create that access for them to enjoy it. And so, that's a quick rundown on the bill, on where it is. We're going to bring it back this next year. And I really hope to enjoy and will be honored to have your continued support as we continue to push for this important initiative.
I'm thrilled that you had an opportunity to speak to many of our members and constituents on the Zoom and really address an issue that came up of concern that somehow the word preservation meant that they would be locked out of their local access to outdoor recreation. And I think you've done a great job of addressing that. And, as we move forward, hopefully we can all be at the table and discuss how that works. Maybe you could, you got a couple more minutes here. Maybe you could just talk for a second about the importance of positioning California and this concept of 30-30 with the global community, and why that's important, especially today.
That's a great question, and it wouldn't be unique for California to take that leadership role. Just a couple years ago, I got a bill through that was signed, the California Migratory Bird Protection Act. When the federal administration removed our nation from this treaty, we were able to get California to jump in a leadership position and say, no, we're still going to abide by this treaty to protect our migratory birds. And as we know, those migratory birds speak a lot. It's kind of like the canary, literally kind of like a canary in the coal mine kind of scenario there. But I mentioned that because that's one example of many where California needs to and has taken a leadership role. Next year, the United Nations Council on Biodiversity is going to be meeting in the spring. And this 30-by-30 concept is going to be on the table for international support. We also have other states, including South Carolina. Their legislature is looking at putting it forward. And we even have legislation in the US Congress. And so we have an opportunity in California to not just lead our nation, but the world, in saying, this is a goal. And this is not a random goal. This is a goal that scientists have come up with to say, this is what we need to do in overall land and water protection in order to meet our goals to combat climate change. And on the flip side of that, actually protect land that our generations to come can enjoy. And so, yeah, absolutely, there's an opportunity for us to take a leadership role. And so, we'll keep pushing it, and I know we'll be doing it together. And it'll give us the opportunity, and we already have other states that have inquired about this legislation as well. So this is not, Cal may lead, but California can't do things alone. We really have to work with our global community. We have to work with other states to make sure that when we're getting out there ahead on these goals, that it's not just us, because if it's just us, it's not going to be enough.
Well, thank you. And one last quick question. As a leader in this space in the legislature, tell me about where your passion for the outdoors comes from. What is it you enjoy doing in the outdoors?
So, I have always kind of had a slant towards protecting the environment. And I think part of it is really just the fact that we've seen over the decades how much damage, we've done by not protecting it, that I really see kind of that existential aspect of protecting the environment. I love being outdoors. In fact, it's interesting because during this COVID crisis, we've seen that one of the few things that actually gets our mental health, our emotional health, and our physical health kind of in order, even if it's for a brief moment, is being in the outdoors. And so especially this year, it's been such a hard year for all of us. I love just taking walks or going for a hike, riding my bike, just finding different ways to really enjoy these beautiful places we have. I'm a caretaker for my father, so we'll get a picnic and go out by a lake and just find a bench. And rather than being indoors all the time, just even if it's for an hour or two, getting away, getting outside, and enjoying. I mean, this is why people come to California. So we came to California and so many others. And so I just love, and in fact, just this last week, one last thing, for my father's birthday, I rented a place on the water there in Pacifica, and just to get that ocean breeze. I mean, it was amazing. And so, there's so many different things that we can do in California. And I want to thank all of you for creating that access to all Californians and everyone that comes to visit.
Thank you, Assemblymember, and we look forward to working with you on the new version of 3030. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
everybody.
now, Lexi, I think it's back over to you or Katie or Matt.
Come on. Thanks, everyone. We'll come back in about 8 minutes with our Inclusivity in the Outdoors panel.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.